opportunities, and making well-informed decisions.
Beginning with the felicitations, as a token of appreciation, we would like to express a small gesture of gratitude to our keynote speaker and the esteemed panel. I would like to invite our esteemed principal, Mr. Kamal Kumar Gupta sir, to present a sapling to our keynote speaker for today, Dr. Ayush Pant sir.
Okay. Did you say I did?
Yeah.
Followed by this, I would now like to invite our teacher in charge, Dr. Savita Singh ma'am, to give the sapling to our honorable principal.
Now, I would like to invite our convener, Dr. Jitendra Kumar sir, to give a sapling to our IQAC coordinator, Dr. Aditya Saxena sir.
Lastly, I would like to invite our respected professor, Dr. Sangeeta Singh ma'am, to give a sapling to our teacher in charge, Dr. Sangeeta Singh ma'am. Economics as a subject is not just about numbers or graphs. It's about understanding the intricate web of choices that shape our world. In EcoZest, we explore the nuances of economic theories, discuss real-world implications, and delve into the heart of economic policies that form the core of the nation. As a society, we also aim to foster a spirit of learning and understanding the economic forces that drive our country amongst our students. So without any further delay, I would now like to invite our teacher in charge, Dr. Sangeeta Singh ma'am, to address the audience and say a few words. Sangeeta Singh ma'am.
Good morning, everyone. I hope all of you are doing well. And we are all here today for the first inaugural talk of the Economic Society EcoJust session 2023-24. I hope all of you are doing well. It gives me great pleasure and honor to welcome each and every one of you for this informative session on strategic thinking and communication. First and foremost, I would like to thank and express my sincere gratitude to Mr. Ayush Pant, Assistant Professor at Ashoka University, for accepting our invitation and taking the time to share his insights with us today. Mr. Pant's impressive professional background and expertise in the field of strategic thinking and communication make him a perfect speaker for this session today. As teacher in charge here of the Department of Economics, Deshbandhu College, I believe it is crucial for our students to develop a strategic mindset and learn effective communication skills. Both these qualities play a significant role in shaping successful professional career, and they can contribute better to the growth and development of our society. In today's world, when the competition is fierce, being able to think strategically and communicate effectively becomes indispensable. Strategic thinking allows us to analyze complex situations and identify potential opportunities and challenges. Therefore, it helps us in devising appropriate solutions. Mr. Pant's expertise in this field will undoubtedly help us in understanding the significance of this topic in our lives. It is whether it is conveying our ideas or collaborating with our colleagues or even negotiating with the clients, communication is the key to building genuine connections and achieving our desired outcomes. So all my dear students and fellow faculty members, I encourage you all to be attentive and actively participate in today's session. And again, I would like my heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Ayush Pant for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your insightful take, ma'am. We believe that your insights and expertise will resonate with the audience and making a significant impact on everyone present. Now, I'd like to invite our esteemed principal, Dr. Kamal Kumar Gupta, sir, to inspire the attendees and share his thoughts of wisdom with us.
It knows my voice is loud, so probably I won't need. No, now it's working. Yeah. Earlier it was not working. I thought it already know that my voice is loud, so it's not needed. Okay, thank you. I extend my heartfelt welcome to today's speaker, Dr. Ayush Pant, Assistant Professor from Ashoka University, a fine economist. Welcome, Ayush. I express my welcome to IQAC Coordinator, Dr. Aditya Saxena, the Economics Faculty, Dr. Jitender, who is also convener of EcoZest, the Economics Society, Sneha, Yogita, Vijay, Nikita, Ritika, then the teacher in charge, Dr. Savita, the senior most faculty, and Dr. Sangeeta. Please excuse me if I'm not correct, if you are a senior most or like this. Then Rakesh, Nadeem, welcome and congratulations for hosting the inaugural session of EcoZest. I welcome all the participants, students, ladies and gentlemen for this fine morning on very, very interesting topic. Now, I'd like to share a couple of things, especially economics. When I talk about the economics, probably even those who are studying economics, I presume they are an inch above the ground. That is the beauty, that is the charm of the subject. There was a time when I always used to boast of the science, that science, and everyone used to dream science. But then gradually what I found, most of the brilliant students of science were moving to the economics. And I think I can see in this crowd also, many of you would have studied science during your school, but switched over to the economics. So economics is really one of the wonderful subjects. I was also browsing the meaning of EcoZest, your society, and it says enthusiasm toward the economics. So I can say all of you are so enthusiastic about this society, and this society, economic society, is one of the very, very active society. It hosts different events throughout the year. Now I ask a question from you. You are all studying economics right now, but when have you studied economics for the first time in your life? The today's talk, strategic planning, and also effective communication. Can anyone tell when have you studied economics for the first time? Anyone? BA में कराए हैं, 12th में, 10th में, 8th में, 9th में, 6th में, 5th में, kindergarten में, or before kindergarten? I can say I did before kindergarten. I'll share one very interesting thing. You know, probably these two things would be related to the today's talk. Strategic planning. When I was a small child, I used to get 10 rupees pocket money per month, per week. And that was my freedom, how to use that. And I used to keep changing. I remember Diwali's time, you are blessed that way. Right now, whatever you want, you can get it. But that time I was really fond of crackers. So I used to save 50 paisa from that 10 rupees pocket money. And in that, at the end, 2 months before, at the end, I used to have 10 rupees with me and I used to buy the crackers out of it. So is it something strategic planning? So it's before kindergarten. I think you must also be doing something that type when your parents say कि no नहीं देना है पैसा, है ना? कई बार होता होगा पैसा नहीं देना है, तो you have two options. One is a strategic planning. You start managing the resources, and second is effective communication. What do you mean effective communication? You convince your parent effectively कि नहीं पैसा चाहिए. And you will agree one more thing about that. Sometimes your siblings may have कि मम्मी पापा तो इसी को प्यार करते हैं, इसकी सारी बातें मान लेते हैं. या sometimes you may have a complaint कि नहीं आप उसको ज्यादा प्यार करते हो, उसकी सारी बात मान लेते हो. What is that? It is how effectively you communicate your parents. Some of you must have this complaint कि नहीं संगीता मैम तो इसकी बात मान लेती है, इसकी लेट असाइनमेंट भी एक्सेप्ट कर लेती है, हमारी नहीं करती. That is what effective communication is. है ना? So what I want to say that always try to relate these concepts which are taught at undergrad level in the holistic approach day-to-day life. Then you will start enjoying each and everything. You will find relevance of each and everything. Otherwise, many a time when we start teaching the concepts and all, you say, oh, they are going above the head. One of the very common joke I crack in my class, you know, what happens when I teach students, the most common reaction of the student is they simply nod the head. You know? And sometime I say that is a common. After that, it increase. So I always ask a question, is that you are really understanding by nodding this head, or you are giving space to my bouncers over your head? And by this. So that's what I always say, always learn, understand the concepts what are being taught in the class, and also try to apply that in day-to-day life. And right now, of course, the two concepts are not that simple these days. Right now, you are living in a world of opportunities where the strategic thinking and communication, effective communication, they are some of the most important idea that really pay you in your life. Thank you, and my best wishes to the economics department, and congratulations for hosting this talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your expertise and such encouraging thoughts. I would now like to invite our respected IQAC coordinator, Dr. Aditya Saxena, sir, to come and address the audience.
First of all, I would like to extend a very warm and hearty welcome to our distinguished speaker for today, Dr. Ayush Pant. So welcome you to Deshbandhu College. And Professor Kamal Kumar Gupta, our Honorable Principal, Dr. Savita Singh Ma'am, Teacher in Charge, Dr. Jitendra, Convener, all the faculty members of Economics Department and all the students. I think all of us are now very keen to listen to the speaker, so we shouldn't be wasting much time. But regarding the title, I was seeing the title, so I felt that this title is very apt for how Yoga is defined in Srimad Bhagavad Gita. It says, Yoga karmasu kaushalam. कर्मों को करने में जो कुशलता है वही योग है, या जब हम कर्मों को कुशलता पूर्वक करते हैं. So the strategic planning and communication is actually part of that kushalta, that adroitness in action. So if we are able to get that adroitness in action, we will be able to achieve anything in the world. So I think in that sense, this talk should be very enlightening for all of us. So once again, sir, I welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your inspiring thoughts. Now, before we go on ahead and invite our guest of honor, I would like to take a moment to introduce him to the audience and share a few of his achievements to us. Today, the task of introducing our guest of honor and speaker is a great privilege. Dr. Ayush Pant has completed his education from the University of Delhi and Terry School of Advanced Studies, along with a PhD degree from the University of Warwick, England. He has triumphantly given his contribution to several research papers, such as The Newsroom Dilemma, Effective Supervision and Optimal Intermediary Test with Disclosure Designs, currently working as a respected professor at the esteemed Ashoka University. He is also actively giving his contributions to his search work on non-discriminatory hierarchies and designing sequential search with Morty Perry. On the account of his unmatched and exceptional talent, he has been bestowed with several awards from Creta, University of Warwick, ERC DTC studentship, and for securing first position in MSc Economics. Our respected guest of honor has also been a part of several conferences and seminars at IIT Kanpur, IIT Bombay, AEC ISI Delhi, Delhi Political Economy Workshop 2021 edition, Ashoka University, Shiv Nada University, Cardiff Business School, Indiana University, and lastly, the 10th annual conference of the Israeli chapter on the Game Theory Society. So without any further delay, please join me in extending a very heartiest and warm welcome to our guest of honor, Dr. Ayush Pant, sir. Thank you, sir, for your graceful presence. We are extremely delighted to have you among us here today.
If you need to record, then I understand. Yes. Sure. Can we put the slides there? All right, morning everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you, Dr. Savita Singh and Professor Kamal Gupta for having me here, and all the other, and also the members of EcoZest, right, actually for calling me here. Right, so I want this to be slightly informal, and I'm gearing it towards the students, not the faculty members, right? So through a show of hands, how many, so what's like the distribution of first year, second year, third year students here? Do we have, how many first year students do we have here? Okay, second year? And third year? Okay, so majority first year students. So that's actually a good thing. Okay, so I heard what I mean, all your professors had to say about this. Unfortunately, I want to tell you that this is actually not anything that what they had just said. All right. Can anyone over here tell me, like, how would you define economics? Any of the economics students, how would you define economics? Anyone? So, bada sawal pooch liya. Right? What is economics, guys? Anyone? The study of, sorry? Oh, okay, I see. Something else? Something else that we've heard? So is it the study of lack, you said, right? So lack of what? Okay. Very good. So it's some sort of study of, you know, something is limited, right? Something in some sense is limited, and you want to make decisions under that, under the limitations that we have, right? So when we talk about strategic decision making in particular is where the lack, as you said, or where the constraints in our decision making are coming from someone else, right? So I'm sort of limited by what you tell me, right? I'm sort of limited by what you are going to do, right? So strategic interactions happen when essentially I have to interact with you, and together our decisions will influence what's the final outcome that we'll get from a particular relationship, right? So here the lack or the constraint in strategic thinking comes from someone else, right? What you are going to do is going to influence what I'm going to do, right? So the study of strategic thinking is called game theory, right? So I don't know if it's offered. Is it offered as an optional here? Okay. Yeah. So I think it's a third year course, right? Yeah. So actually, I was not exposed to game theory all the way up until I did my master's, right? So in my college, I'm also from DU. I didn't get an opportunity to study game theory when I was in my third year. I mean, you're lucky if you have that opportunity here. So in general, game theory is a vast subject, right? It's a massive subject where we study a host of interactions and how our interactions can lead to certain type of outcomes for us as a society, right? This is not what this particular topic is about. We are going to apply game theory in a particular context of communication, right? So how do we communicate with one another, particularly when I know that whatever I'm going to say, you are going to take into account in your decision making, and then you are going to act a certain way, right? So if that is the case, then I want to distort my information in a particular way so as to influence your decision making, right? And I think a classic example of this is really to think about. I think I put it up also. I don't know if you shared this. Yes, right. So think about how many times you've heard this idea that if you have haldi wala doodh, it's actually going to prevent certain types of cancers. That's actually out there, right? And it's also very good for healing. I'm sure you must have heard that. And also you must have tried it at some point. Now that's an information that you're getting, right? And there are many reasons to believe this information, right? Because there are a lot of benefits allegedly of having haldi wala doodh. But the question that a game theorist is going to ask is, but why? Why should I believe this, right? Fine, I know some benefits, but are there no costs? Am I being influenced a certain way when somebody tells me to have haldi wala doodh? So the question that we want to ask over here is very fundamental. It's essentially, why should we believe in any information that comes our way, right? So essentially, when presented with any new information by another party, how does one reason whether or not I should trust it, right? So that's the fundamental question that we want to ask. Why should I trust what you're telling me, right? Is it obvious? Now, there are a lot of reasons. We'll come back to this example and then we'll ask at the end, why did you actually end up believing after we've sort of understood the components of the problem? Okay, but let's move ahead and I'll just tell you a quick learning checklist of what we're going to do today. I'm going to describe a standard communication process to you guys, right? Then once we've understood the communication process, then we are going to ask, well, can we draw some logical predictions out of the way these people are interacting with each other, right? Then we're going to try to apply our logical reasoning in a particular context, right? And I'll try to give you a very reasonable context that all of you are actually exposed to today, right? And then finally, we can have conclusions and question and answers, but please feel free to stop me at any time and ask me questions in between, right? Because otherwise, if it's one way, then it gets kind of boring. Okay. So let's start from the beginning and let's talk about what the communication and the decision process looks like. A typical communication process. What does it look like for us? Now, a typical communication process involves 3 steps, right? In the first step, there is some information out there that is realized. And of course, I'll give you examples to help you motivate these ideas, right? And suppose there is some information out there that you want to understand to be able to make a certain decision, right? So in the example that I gave you initially of haldi wala doodh, the first question that you should ask over there is that the information out there is haldi wala doodh actually good for us or not, right? So that's the information out there, right? Whether it's fundamentally good for us or not, right? Then the second is, given that there is some information out there, someone is going to communicate that information to you, right? So someone is going to speak about that information to you to influence your decision, right? So if it's your grandmom who's telling you have haldi wala doodh, she wants to influence you to have haldi wala doodh, right? That's what her objective is. She wants to make you have haldi wala doodh, right? And then finally, based on what this person has told me, I'm going to make a decision, right? I'm going to decide whether to have haldi wala doodh or not to have it, right? So that's a typical communication process, which can be broken down into 3 steps. First is the information, then is the communication, and then is the decision. Does that make sense? Okay, let's look at that a little bit more in detail. Particularly, let's start from the first step, the information, right? Now, in game theory, we like to think of the information as the state, right? It's the reality. It's the state of the world that ye sach hai. This is the information out there, right? So we call it state, right? And you can think about state in a number of different contexts. So here are a few of them. I don't know if you can see this, but mouse. Okay, so let it be. So think of the context in which you are a voter and you're going to vote in an election, right? Now the politician over there wants to convince you that, oh, I'm actually somebody who's going to listen to you, right? I'm somebody who is capable of solving your problems. I'm somebody who's great, whatever, right? So what is that underlying information, right? That underlying information is that, oh, I'm great, right? Or that I'm capable of serving you. That's one example of a state in that particular context. Let's change the context, right? So another context could be organizations are choosing who to hire, right? So in that particular context, what's the state? The state is, well, is it the case that you are capable of landing that job, right? So that's the information out there, that whether you are a good fit for the job. That's the information that is relevant for the organization's decision making, right? Now think of the case in which you are swiping right on a dating app, right? So what's the information out there? The information out there is whether the person on the other side who you're swiping right is actually a good match for you, right? And that is something that is unknown to you. Similarly, venture capitalists choose which project to invest in based on limited information. And what's that information? Whether this entrepreneur is actually a good fit for me as a venture capitalist, right? So in a host of these cases, what we have is that there's some hidden information underlying that the other party wants to know, right? Okay. So that's the information out there. Now in the second stage, communication is going to happen, right? Now we want to think of communication as some way to influence the decision of the other party, right? And that's why we're going to call it influence action, right? Influence action is a way to influence the other party to choose what you want them to choose, right? Now, the whole problem is because the party who's making the decision is actually not the one who's better informed, right? So when your dadi tells you have haldi wala doodh, you are not informed initially, right? So now she is the one who is telling you, right? So she's trying to influence your action in some way, right? So think about another example. Think about how politicians influence your actions, right? They could spread information in social media. That's the way to influence your action, right? Think about how you communicate with a potential employer when you go in the market. You're going to give your CV. That's the way to communicate, because now you're telling the person, the organization, that, see, look at me. I'm a good fit for this company, right? So there are many, many ways in which you can try to communicate, right? And communication doesn't only have to be talking with each other, right? So there are a host of ways of communicating with each other. And indeed, here are a couple of, no, sorry, I'll talk about this. Let me just show you. Do I have that example? No, so I think it's in the end. So anyway, so in a host of these examples, what we have is that there are different ways of communicating. So how do we categorize communication? Well, one way to categorize communication is through hard and soft information. What is hard information? Hard information is something that can be proved. That's verifiable. What's an example of that? An example of that is, think about your 12th grade marks, right? That's verifiable because there is a degree, there's a scorecard out there that shows what are your grades, right? So that's verifiable information. Similarly, the degree that you will earn from DU is verifiable information because that is backed by some evidence, right? But not all communication is like this, right? Now think about, go back to your haldi wala doodh example. Now when your dadi tells you, that's not hard information. it's not backed by any evidence, right? There's no proof that haldi wala doodh is actually good for you, right? So that's what we call soft information. Now, the beauty of hard versus soft information is that hard information can be hidden. So if I'm trying to influence you, then I can hide any evidence that I have that shows me in a bad light, right? But if it's soft information, then I can outright lie about it, right? There's no point of hiding it. I can just straight away lie about things, right? So you don't have to believe me because there's no evidence to back that thing, right? Another way to think about how to influence people is costly versus costless actions. What's that? Now think about a rally, a political rally is a way to influence voters' decision. But communicating through a rally is very expensive because a lot of money has to be spent to set up that rally. That's costly communication. But your dadi didn't have to spend any money to talk to you, right? That's costless communication, right? So there's many ways of thinking about how we communicate with one another. Make sense? Okay. All right. So we have information, we have influencing each other. Now let's talk about how decision-making works. Now, for decision-making, we want to understand what are the objectives of the two parties, right? Now, why do you tend to believe your dadi? Because she's thinking good about you, right? So her interests are aligned with those of yours. The problem in communication starts when we know that the other party wants something else from the communication. And there are many examples of this, right? So for example, a political power, right? A politician might want influence. They just might want to get re-elected, right? But what you want is somebody who actually works. Now your incentives are misaligned. You guys want different things from this communication, right? That's an example of how we might want different things. Think about a professor who tells you that, you know what, the next exam is going to be easy or hard, whatever they're telling you, right? Now, in this context, a professor wants you to learn. They want you to put in effort, but all you want are good grades for the least amount of effort, right? So now your objectives are misaligned. You want something and the other person wants something else, right? Another context, think about when you go and apply for a job. In that context, you want the job independent of your skill set. I don't care what my skills are. I just want this job. But the organization or the firm only wants to hire you if you actually have the required skill sets, right? So now your objectives are misaligned, right? So what have we brought it down to? We've said that, okay, there's some information out there, then there's a way of communicating, and then we'll take a decision. And decision making is critical only when our objectives are different from each other. Okay. Any questions? I'm just not stopping. I just assume that you guys are following. Any questions thus far? Okay. So let's try to see what conclusions can come out of this communication between the two parties. Okay. So how do we want to think of what predictions can one make? Well, we think of an equilibrium arising in the communication between the two parties, right? And an equilibrium is merely something where our expectations turn into reality. Now, that's a very fun way to think about an equilibrium, and perhaps not something that you would have seen in your economics courses ever, right? So the way to think about it is as follows, that I expect the other party to behave a certain way. The other party in return expects me to behave a certain way. If those expectations turn into reality, we're going to say that this is an equilibrium. Okay. Now think about the haldi wala doodh example again. I expected my grandmom to come and tell me, have haldi wala doodh agar yahan pe dard ho rahi hai to. right? But she also expected that you will listen to her. And that's what actually ended up happening, right? She wanted you to have haldi wala doodh. You wanted to listen to her, and that became an equilibrium. That becomes the reality of this world. But now suppose that you expected her to say haldi wala doodh, and she comes around and say, beta, daru pee le tu ab. That's an off equilibrium. That's not something that you would have expected your dadi to have said. Now, how do I react to that? Right? That's an off equilibrium. So it cannot happen in equilibrium because that cannot become reality because I didn't expect that to happen. Right? So we want to capture this idea of expectations becoming reality when we think about communication. Okay? So let's look at a few contexts. Actually, I'll be done very quickly. I'm very happy. These people are not asking any questions. I was just planning ki it will be a long discussion session, but fine. Yeah. Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, Ayush, actually, you started your lecture with the first, like, sort of understanding information. But at the same time, I feel like in economics realities, information is not that free. Absolutely, it's costly affair.
It's very costly. Yes.
Right. So, and the second point is that we have the assumption of rationality. So your example that you started with is, I think, somewhere it is not indicative of the kinds of economic reality we deal with. Because there can be asymmetric information or misinformation, and there are, there are huge flows of information all the time. So maybe like the Haldiwala example is quite relevant to all of us.
No, but it
But
is,
do you
in fact,
think-
precisely because of that,
Yeah.
right? So I'll come back to the haldi wala doodh
Yeah.
at the end, and
So-
we'll exactly talk about that issue.
Right.
Exactly what you're talking about. But
Yeah.
this is a model. What I'm essentially describing in layman's term is the idea of asymmetric information, right?
Definitely.
That's essentially it.
Yeah.
But now you can question. That's precisely the point that I want the students to question at the end of it.
Right.
Is where did the dadi get her information from?
Yeah,
Right?
probably.
Why should we believe her? Right? So that's sort of the big picture of it. But you're right, absolutely. So, but this is the idea is asymmetric information.
So
over here that
generally we don't tend to believe things, if we,
exactly.
as economic agents, we generally don't tend to believe things which are irrational in this. So this is very, this is
It's
the,
not necessarily
yeah.
irrational. To have haldi wala doodh is absolutely not irrational. It's not.
no, I believe in this thing because it's very common, so common to all of us. If we take this example, there are a lot of similar examples in our households. It's not only about haldi wala doodh, but it's a good example after all. So, but I don't want to continue
Yeah,
with this.
sure. I mean,
thing.
it's-
You better you can please continue and
Okay. So let's put this equilibrium notion in a particular context, right? So suppose your teacher tells you that the upcoming exam is very hard. Now the question is, should you believe her? Should you believe her? There are a lot of students who actually, at least to me, they come and ask me, they're like, sir, agla exam kya bahut mushkil hoga. And then I tell them, but why are you asking me? Do you believe anything that I'm going to tell you? And there's a reason for it, right? So think about this. So let's think about the objectives, right? So your teacher's motivation is to make you put in effort in the learning, right? And the only thing that you want to do is good grades and cut your effort as much as you can, right? Now ask yourself a very simple question. I told you about costly and costless information, communication. Now ask yourself, does it pay for your teacher to say something otherwise? Is it costly for her to say something else? She might as well tell you it's easy. She might as well tell you it's hard. So it's completely costless for her to say anything in this world. But if it's costless, then ask yourself, how should I have anticipated her to behave in this case? It's meaningless. She could have said anything. But if she could have said anything, then you shouldn't trust anything that she says. And that's why this question is a foolish question. Don't ever go to your teachers and ask them whether the exam is hard or easy. Because independent of how hard or easy the exam is, she can always just say whatever the hell she wants to. Right? And for that reason, the only equilibrium is where in the communication, I'm not able to understand anything. There's no informational content of that communication. Right? I do not learn anything if she tells me hard. And this actually happens. Do you believe her when she says that the exam is easy? No, you still go ahead and do your own things. If she says it's hard, you still go ahead and do your own things. So how does it matter? It does not. So the point is that when the communication is costless, like in this example, then the prediction is that we shouldn't be getting any information. Right? That's the first prediction. Now think about another situation where at some rally, a politician claims that you should vote for me because in the past, I have reduced the poverty of this area. Now, should you believe this? Now, let's think about your motivations and the politician's motivation again. Right? Now, the politician is saying this to get re-elected. That's the only motivation that the politician has in all of this, to get re-elected. Right? What are your motivations? Your motivations are that you want to vote for someone who actually works for the voters. Okay. Now, does it cost for him to say this, make this claim? Now, this is a tricky bit, right? Now, if he believed, if he anticipated that you are going to go back and check on the internet and look for data on what he's claiming, then it's costly for him. But not in a world where the politician knows that tomorrow he can divert your attention to something completely new. There's a completely new topic that he can bring up tomorrow, and then you're not even going to look at this data. Right? So now the prediction is very weird over here. So there'll be conditions under which you should actually trust the politician. But for that, it should fall on you to go back and check. But in other cases, again, the communication is meaningless and you should not believe the politician because come tomorrow, he's going to throw in a completely new world for you to think about, right? So in that case, you should not trust the politician, right? And you get different kinds of predictions in the two cases. Now let's look at this. Now, suppose that you are on Tinder, right? And you see this bio of this guy on Tinder, right? And you should actually go ahead and read what this guy is saying. This guy says, one hell of a guy. This is what Times of India has said about him, right? I wish I could be more like him. That's what Sachin Tendulkar has said about him, right? He's got it made. That's what Ratan Tata is saying about him. Now think about this situation, right? Now, what are your motivations? Your motivations are to only swipe right to this guy if you actually think he's a stellar guy to be with, right? What is the guy's motivation? The guy's motivation is to get you to swipe right, independent of whether he's stellar or not, okay? But now ask yourself, does it cost him to say something else? Well, indeed it does, because even though these are just words over here, they mean nothing. But they are very interesting because they signal to you that he's put in effort into making his Tinder bio, right? And when you look at that effort, you appreciate that effort because someone else has not put in this kind of effort, right? So by having a stellar bio, you essentially signal to the decision maker that, you know what, I'm a good guy to be with. Right? And that's why you should actually trust this information, right? Even though you're not directly trusting anything over here, right? It's not like Sachin Tendulkar has actually called him a stellar guy, but you're trusting the fact that he is stellar in the fact that he put in the effort to write this amazing bio, right? So now the communication is effective over here. right? Even though it's meaningless in its own right. It doesn't say anything, right? Because we know for a fact that these things are not true, right? But still it signals to you that he's a smart guy, right? That he's putting an effort into this. But on the other hand, a person can also believe that this guy is so lazy and so attention seeking, such a attention seeker, and he's putting in so much time to just formulate the thing about. So exactly. So the objectives matter, right? So think about the assumptions that I started out with. The assumption that I started out with is that you actually want to date a guy who is stellar in whatever sense, right? But if your definition of stellar is completely different, then I agree with you. Right? Then perhaps you will see this as very corny and you'll be like, "Kaun pagal hai ye? Kya likh raha hai?" Right? But the objectives matter. Right? So the objectives really do matter. So in my story, I said that there's an objective that makes you want to date a guy who's putting in effort in some sense. Right? Okay. So that's actually, I'm onto the last leg of my lecture now in that spirit, where I'll actually show you how we can think strategically in a real world setting, right? I mean, of course, all of these were real world settings, but something that is really practical to all of you guys, which is how do you design your CV, right? I mean, many of you will be on the job markets very soon, right? Now think about how should you design your CV. Now, first consider in your head, a CV is a way of telling a potential employer that you are employable, that you have certain skill sets, right? And there is asymmetric information over here because you know yourself more than the employer knows you, right? So you have some information that the employer wants to know, right? So the decision maker over here is the employer, and you are the person who wants to influence the employer to make a certain decision, right? Okay. So if you're to believe all the stories that I've just told you, then the first thing to note is you should know what the objective function is, right? You should know what the potential employer wants out of you, right? So how does that help me? It helps me in knowing that I should be investing in certain type of skills that make me employable in the future, right? So the first advice that I have for you over here is that you should start early to look into the potential job profiles, but not just potential job profiles. You should also be looking at where these firms are investing. So think about if you're a first year student today, then you will be on the market in 3 years from now, right? So you should be looking into the kind of firms where you want the job and look at what kind of investments they are making. Because what will that help you with? It will help you with giving you information about what kind of skills is it that these people seek from me tomorrow, right? So that's the first thing that you should do. So for example, is the company investing in AI and ML? If it is, then that's what you should be investing in right now, right? Secondly, ask yourself, if it's a consultancy firm, ask yourself what kind of clients are they picking up, right? Then you want to invest in the kind of skills that those clients want, right? So that's the first thing that you can do. So start early. The second is build specializations in those kind of skills, right? So, and what you want is not costless communication, because as I just argued, costless communication cannot be trusted, right? Costless communication cannot be trusted. What can be trusted is evidence, right? So for that reason, build the skills that give you certification of those skills, right? So look for AI and ML certifications, for example. There are a host of companies that offer that. For example, Google does it. Like Google offers AI ML certifications, by the way. Look for internships in similar companies to understand the skill set, right? And one thing that you should note is diversification of skills can only make sense if you are unsure about the kind of companies that you want to apply to, because it's costly for you to acquire a new skill. But if you're already aware of the skills that they want, you can sell yourself in a better way if you only invest in those kind of skills today, right? So do not diversify. Do not say कि कहीं पे भी नौकरी मिल जाए मैं internship कर लूंगा. That's a bad approach. You don't want to do that, right? And lastly, actually get down to building your CV. And to build your CV, first note, just like that Tinder's bio, writing that introduction about you is critical. It's not costless to you, because to tailor an introduction to the company's needs is not something that everyone else can do. So you should invest in writing that one little paragraph at the beginning that signals to the company that he has looked into the kind of profile that, is desirable here. So really do invest in writing that, 2 or 3 lines at the beginning. That's the first communication strategy that you can use. The second communication strategy you can use is, given that you have you've developed various skills, do not put everything in your CV. Just do not. Right? You don't want to say that मुझे ये भी आता है, ये भी. That's not a good strategy. That's a poor strategy. A better strategy is to say, I'm only going to show you the skills that are important for this particular. And that's why I'm a good fit for this company. Right? So only put in those skills that are relevant to that particular company. And lastly, always be concise in your CVs. Why? Again, for the same reason as that Tinder bio. Because not all of you are skilled enough to be very concise. So then when you are actually concise, it signals to the other party that you have that skill of being able to think in a concise manner. Right? So if you note down all of these, actually it's a brilliant way to develop your CV. And imagine that I could say all of this merely from economics, and you would not even have imagined ever that an economist would come and tell you about how to build your CV, because economics is not about optimizations all the time, right? Okay. But now coming back to what you were saying, throughout this, I sort of assume that you understand the objectives and you're working towards certain objectives. But humans are behavioral. They're not always rational, right? Indeed, that is the case, and people can take advantage of you if you are a behavioral person. How does that happen? First way to think about is that our attention span is limited as human beings. That's a behavioral concern. In the real world, I cannot process all the information that is given to me. Usually, I look at a particular thing and that's the only thing that I can process. Now go back to the politician example that I told you. Politicians actually use it to divert your attention to different topics, right? They always try to tell you, aaj ye dekho, or aaj ye dekho. That's a way to influence you. But once you're aware of it, you should be more careful, right? You should try to not get your attention diverted from topic to topic to topic. And that's a very hard skill to have, especially given the world that you're living in today, where social media is just out there to influence you all the time, right? But it helps in the sense that you will be much less amenable to being influenced by others if your attention is not constantly being diverted from one topic to the other, right? Another thing is that we often use heuristics. What are heuristics? Heuristics are basically some simple ways that humans and animals have developed to come up to certain decisions, right? So oftentimes we are not able to process so much information and to actually tailor our actions to each and everything. We just use rules of thumb, right? So so it could be as simple as something like, a rule of thumb for me could be that if I see in this CV, this person has 5 skills, I'm going to hire him. That's a rule of thumb, right? But if you know that someone else is using the rule of thumb, then you can exploit them in that particular way, right? So be careful to not follow rules of thumbs, because that is going to distort your decisions in some ways, right? And indeed, an influencer can use it to game you and your decisions. Particularly, one standard way of influencing decisions is to bombard the social media with similar kind of messages. How does that help? You cannot even look anywhere else then. That's the only thing that you will consider, independent of whether it's the truth or not. That's one way to influence you. You don't want to be influenced that way, right? So let me just quickly summarize. Strategic reasoning requires application of logic to decision making. Always begin by trying to understand the motivation of those who are trying to influence you. That's critical. You should, instead of being influenced from the get-go, don't be that person. Try to understand why is this person trying to communicate with you the way they are communicating with you, right? Then reason in your head what you expect them to do, right? And then make a decision that best suits your objectives. And finally, spend time reasoning strategically rather than on your whims and biases and your fallacies. And there are a lot of those that we as humans exhibit, right? So try to avoid falling in those biased traps, because there are a lot of those, and there are people who are constantly trying to influence you in your day in, day out, right? So don't be that person, and try to think strategically and try to reason strategically, right? Understand the person's motivations, understand the choices that they are making. And now, coming back to the Haldiwala Doodh example, the big picture is, the beautiful example that it was that there, your dadi was thinking of you, right? And that's why there was no misalignment of objectives. And that's why you tended to believe her. But the good question to ask is, what was her source of information? So that's not, so the only reason I gave you in today's talk was think about people's objectives. But in the real world, you are being influenced by a network of individuals, your families, your friends, and so on and so forth. So a related question that you should ask yourself is, even if I think that we are thinking alike and we want the same thing in this world, even then, ask yourself, what is the source of their information? Have any of you stopped to ask whether Haldiwala Doodh is actually good for you or not? Has anyone, do you even know how to start doing the research on that question? I'm actually asking you, do you know how you go about looking for whether this information is correct or not? No. So what kind of information are you looking for? You really want to know whether it actually is good for your health or not. That's a scientific question. It's a causal question that only science can answer for you. The correct way to go about that is to actually search on Scholar, Google Scholar. Are you guys aware of Google Scholar, by the way? So that's the starting point. And just by the way, there's another website which you can look at. It's called Consensus. Consensus is a beautiful website that actually tells you what the science agrees on a particular topic. And I want you to go and search for yourself whether actually having Haldiwala Doodh is good for your health or not on Consensus. Because what Consensus does is that it's going to look on the internet for all the scientific research papers that look at the effect of turmeric milk on human health, right? And it's going to combine that, and it's going to show you all the research papers that have actually been done on this topic, right? And then it's going to show you a conclusion out of that. I'm not going to give out the answer to this question, but the critical thing over here is, again, going back to the problem, is that you have to make that costly investment of finding out whether the information is true or not, right? You cannot just take everyone's word just because they're saying it, or just because many people are saying it. Just because many people are saying something does not make it true, right? Okay, that's it then. So, but I mean, I think that's for a scientist to answer this question, but I think as long as they're RCTs, I think they're devoid to the maximum degree. And they're not just RCTs, I'm saying they're an amalgamation of RCTs. So what are they called? Those kind of studies. The studies that combine, that look at a bunch of data, I'm sorry, a bunch of RCTs and combine the conclusions from that. So those studies are the best. Meta studies. Meta studies are the best way to actually get information on a scientific question, because they always tell you how the scientific opinion is concluding on a particular thing, right? And like you said, I mean, things can change with time. So the best that you can ask yourself is that today, do we believe that this is true? Tomorrow we might change on that, right? I mean, the science might change on that. That's precisely the point. That's precisely the point. That's precisely the point, right? But you will have to make that investment, right? Instead of looking in your networks and just seeing whether the people in your networks believe it or not, right? Okay, so that's it. I'm happy to answer any further questions.
Right.
And, that's my email ID, by the way, for those of you who are interested in writing to me.
So hi, everyone. The floor is open for any questions. The speaker will take them up. If you have any, please press them.
Should you make AI tools to what? So that's an interesting question. Actually, no, though it is indeed a good question. So, I mean, I'm just talking from my experience, is because my wife, she used ChatGPT to do something on, for an Instagram post, actually. Right? And a lot of people, actually, a lot of businesses have started using ChatGPT for making Instagram posts. And what happened is, by the time we were in the 5th Instagram post, I could make out. She didn't have to tell me whether this is AI or not. I could make out, and I could not just make out her post, but I could make out other people's posts also, whether they have been ChatGPT'd or not, right? So that's a tightrope that you want to walk on, precisely because if indeed you're using ChatGPT for your CV, then if you're sure that it signals to the employer that you have not used ChatGPT, that is when you want to use it. But not if the employer can decipher from it that you have actually used ChatGPT. So it's actually, and there are ways of manipulating ChatGPT to get different types of answers, right? So the only thing that you have to be careful, and that's why there's a new job profile out there, which is called, how do you write the perfect prompts, right? I don't know what that job profile is called, but there are a lot of jobs. Yeah, prompt engineering. So actually with optimal prompt engineering, I believe that it's actually a good strategy, but only when the optimal prompt engineering. I would not say that if you go off of it, then I don't think it's a good strategy. So you have to be really confident that when you are using ChatGPT, then it does not signal that you've used ChatGPT.
Because right now because ChatGPT on their website also claim that right now there is no evidence or no, like they themselves said that even if you give us an answer that has been written down by ChatGPT, we would not be able to identify that this has actually been written by ChatGPT. One day I would be able to say that yes, the software would claim that it is ChatGPT. The other day, the software would be like, no,
But
this
I
is
agree.
completely
So, but that's
computer-driven.
across topics, right? So when you apply for a job, then you know that if people are writing, if everyone has an understanding of what the job requirements are, right? And everyone is using ChatGPT, I'm pretty confident that somebody on the HR team can very easily decipher that, this is all ChatGPT on a particular topic with a particular sort of prompts, which is what people are most likely to write. And if you can see consistencies in them, then
I think that consistency right from the fact that when people just
so I agree.
it is something that happens. Like when
I agree. I agree. I agree. I agree. So you don't want to do that. That's precisely it, right? I mean, do not ever blindly copy it. Even if you're using ChatGPT, make it your own so that it signals that you have put in the effort. Ultimately, what you have to signal is the fact that you are somebody who has put in the effort into this objective.
A follow-up. So basically, in the discussion that we had just right now, aren't like in the trend that's coming up right now, we are also having platforms that basically humanize the AI generated content. How do we like then go about it? Right.
So
So
of course, I mean, so see, that's the point. The question is always the same thing, right? So go to the deeper level question. Any of these tools, as long as they signal your effort, cool, use them. But the moment everybody starts using it, that's when you have a problem in your hand. Because then the other party can figure out that you're not putting in the effort. It's a cheap thing for everyone to use, so they're just using it, right? So in any communication, that is important. You want to be able to stand out in your communication, right? So you want to be able to stand out, and as long as the other party cannot understand that you have, used some of these tools to come up with your communication strategy, it's cool, use it. But the underlying question is always that, are you able to credibly signal? And of course, I'm no expert, so I cannot answer which of these tools you should use and which of these are not famous enough for you to use in some
Yeah,
sort.
yeah.
would you classify it as a costly or costless communication?
So that's a very good question. So exactly, prompt engineering makes it a costly communication. But if you're doing run-of-the-mill nonsense, it's costless communication. So the whole point is to be able to signal that cost was involved in this. Right? And effort was involved in this. You want to be able to signal that.
When internet became popular and everyone was just copying and pasting. Today, if you come and tell me that you checked something on internet and this is amazing, I would never judge you that, oh, you went and checked on internet and this is amazing. That's because now it has become the state of the art that everyone is looking up information on internet. Nobody's judging you. But I will judge you if you just literally copy paste and tell me that, yeah, I've just used this information instead of now, like the way professors like Dr. Ayush Pant is also suggesting, like when you are on chat GPT, if you can actually use it as a sense of direction, that yes, you know, that like the way he has also given recommendations, maybe chat GPT would also give you similar recommendations, but you got to work on that thing. So don't be scared of chat GPT. Learn how to make the best use of chat GPT. Just the way we are no longer scared of using Google Chrome or Google Yahoo or any of those platforms.
I don't think anyone is using Yahoo, but
Slowly these things will be normalized, I guess, with time, right?
but the moment they're normalized, then they lose their value. Right? That's the whole point.
Any more questions?
Yep.
Good morning, sir. Whatever I got from your presentation is that being skeptic is good, is it?
I don't know how.
I'm asking you because you started from Haldiwala Doodh and ended somewhere, and you even give proofs. We cannot say proof, but what I found, there is a skepticism in your thoughts. So is it okay to be always skeptic? Because you
So
start.
I'm not making any claims about how you should be in your life in general, right? But wherever decisions impact you in a meaningful way, you should be skeptical about how those decisions were made and what was the source of the information on the basis of which those decisions were made.
That way we cannot trust ChatGPT.
Yeah. So for example, you should not use ChatGPT for doing any research. In fact, they say it themselves because it's just a language model, right? So you should never use it for research. Why? Because research involves relevant decision making that is going to impact people's lives, right? So anywhere where there's meaningful impact on your payoffs, and I'm using payoffs loosely, but the point of payoffs is anywhere where your life is meaningfully impacted in a positive or a negative way. That's where you should be skeptic of the information and where it comes from. right? But I'm not giving you a general life gyan about, be a pessimist in life. I'm not saying that.
Okay, so we were talking about building up. And as a first year student, I personally don't know would I want to join or any killer job idea in mind. So what would you suggest? In which direction should I start building my CV?
No, so that's exactly what I was asking you. Try to understand what is it that you want from life, right? Figure out your objectives. This is the age in which you want to figure out your objectives and the objectives of what the other party wants, right? So it's reasonable to assume. So for example, for me personally, when I was in my first year, I was figuring out, and I went to this consultancy firm for an internship. I walked out in 10 days out of that because I knew and I understood, I figured out that that was not something for me, right? So I was trying to figure out those objective functions there essentially, right? What is it that we want, right? The goals, right? And the more you know about yourself and the more you know about the goals of what the companies want, you can tailor them to yourself to them in a meaningful way, right? But again, I mean, an economist's predictions are always of this type: if this, then that, right? They're not like ki aisa hi karo, right? So I can only tell you, if you are interested in consultancy, then look for those kind of, specializations, but you might not be, right? Oh, there are many, many, many ways. I gave you a meaningful example in terms of votes. Your votes are important, right? You're young adults, right? You're going to start voting now, right? So there you must really think about how are you being influenced, right? And that's going to impact the world that you build for yourself, right? Through your votes. That's the most critical one, but just not that, right? I mean, you should ask yourself, even in day-to-day questions, like, right? Ask, why should you trust your teacher? Right? I mean, that's a very fundamental question. Just because they're experienced, you should believe them, doesn't sound like a reasonable thing to me, right? Maybe they are biased, right? Maybe they are not giving you the complete picture, right? So ask yourself these day in, day out questions. It's everywhere. All right. So diversification makes sense wherever you're uncertain, right? If there's any type of uncertainty in your decision making, you should diversify your skill set. But then the critical thing is, once you've diversified your skill set, sara skill set mat likh do har CV mein. That is the takeaway from all of this, right? It's not a good thing to say कि मैंने ये भी करा, ये भी करा, ये भी करा, मुझे हिंदी भी आती है, मुझे बंगाली भी आती. Useless. It doesn't signal anything about you. It actually shows that you are a confused individual, right? So if you have diversified, then only tailor your CV to that particular job. But do diversify if you are uncertain about, your future prospects, which you should, of course.
Any more questions? No. Okay, cool.
Okay, thank you.
All right. That was indeed a really great session, and I'm sure that it was able to suffice all the queries that our students and faculty members had. Mine surely were. Lastly, I would like to invite our president for the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Nikhil Dama, the president of Economics Society. Our Economics Department Society is an honor to stand before today to convey deepest gratitude to all who have contributed to the success of their event. First of foremost, I had like to extend a heartfelt thank you to our esteemed guest speaker, Dr. Ayush Pant. Your insights have not only enriched us intellectually but also inspired us to strive for excellence. We are truly grateful that you accepted our invitation. I would like also to express my gratitude to our college management and faculty who have consistently backed our initiative. A special mention most go to our principal, sir, Professor Kamar Gwar Gupta, teachers in charge, Dr. Savita ma'am, support, encouragement. Lastly, none of this would have been possible without the hard work of dedication. My colleagues in the Ecozest Society, your commitment has been invaluable in marketing today event a reality. Thank you to each and every one of you here today. Your presence has added immeasurable value of this gathering, making it both wonderful and memorable. Once again, thank you everyone.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. We have officially come to the end of the event.
Thank you. Thank you.